Hello and welcome everyone. To start things off, I want to take you behind the scenes a little. Now, I'm not a diplomat by any means, and I don't really know everything that's going on behind closed doors. But what do you think about the former U.S. ambassador to Israel, Daniel Shapiro? Daniel Shapiro just published an article on one of the most powerful analytical platforms in the world, Foreign Policy. And he said something that really caught my attention. He said the problem with what's happening in Gaza right now is that with every passing day, the idea of displacement, opening the borders, and all that is becoming more and more realistic. Right now, Palestinians are being pushed toward the Egyptian border. Israel, instead of having 400 aid distribution points in Gaza, now has only 4 left, and the situation is extremely dangerous. That sentence really stuck with me. But if you think that's the only serious line in Daniel Shapiro's article, believe me, it's packed with explosive revelations. And let's not forget, this guy was the former U.S. ambassador to Israel, and also served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East Affairs. His article reveals a lot of secrets. The Israeli writer Zvi Bareil published an article today as well, in which he says that finally, Netanyahu has revealed the true goal behind this war. But the most alarming news today is that the U.S. has found a way out. And they said, by the way, we found a country that might. A country is now being considered to receive Palestinians, and the plan is to have them displaced there. This is serious and important stuff. So let's get straight into it. What we have today might be something completely new for you. Something you're hearing for the first time regarding the displacement to Sinai. What's really going on? Honestly, I'd like to start with what's currently happening in the Gaza Strip. Right now, Steve Witkoff, the U.S. envoy, like I mentioned before, is in a position where he can talk to Hamas through a man named Bushra Bahba, and he communicates with Israel through Netanyahu. At this point, he basically controls all the lines of communication. And now, the man has come up with a completely new proposal, different from anything we've seen before. So what did he say? He said that Hamas would release 10 living hostages and 1 body. Okay, but how exactly would this proposal work? He explained that on day 1, Hamas would release 5 living hostages and 9 bodies. Then on day 7, they would release another 5 living hostages and 9 more bodies. Now keep in mind, Hamas currently holds 59 hostages, a mix of living people and corpses. According to the Israeli military, Hamas has exactly 20 living hostages and the rest are deceased. That's the breakdown. In return for this, there would be a 2-month ceasefire or 60 days of no attacks. And on the other side, Israel would release 1,111 Palestinian prisoners from Gaza. Al-Hadath has obtained a document by Witkoff, which reveals that Hamas is expected to release 10 living hostages and the bodies of 18 others over 2 days, the 1st and the 7th day. Aid would be sent into Gaza immediately after Hamas agrees to the ceasefire. Now, you also need to understand something important. All the Palestinians Israel agrees to release are from inside the Gaza Strip. That means Israel still has the ability to rearrest them at any time. And this has already happened before. Israel has rearrested released Palestinian prisoners. From Israel's point of view, it sees this as a better solution, to have them die in Gaza rather than let them continue to eat and survive. And Israel isn't just talking about releasing that number. They're also considering the release of 125 Palestinian prisoners with high sentences, in addition to 180 bodies of Gaza residents. On the 10th day, Hamas would be required to submit a complete list, including detailed medical reports on the condition of the remaining hostages. The agreement also includes the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners who have either high or life sentences, and those with long-term prison terms. The deal even covers a gradual partial withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip, according to a source from Hamas. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to be the one to officially announce the ceasefire and guarantee that all parties comply with the agreement. In return, Israel will immediately halt all military operations targeting the Gaza Strip. The agreement will also be under the supervision of Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. They will be the official guarantors of the ceasefire. Steve Witkoff himself is expected to come and put the final touches on the ceasefire plan and oversee the launch of the entire process. It seems we're getting closer to sending out a new term sheet, and we hope it will be delivered later today. Honestly, I have a good feeling about reaching a ceasefire in Gaza, one that could eventually lead to a lasting peace solution to the conflict. But now you might ask, what's strange or new about the offer I just mentioned? What's unusual here? Well, what's surprising is that Donald Trump is the one backing this ceasefire initiative. That's the twist. And don't forget, this entire proposal is the work of Steve Witkoff, the U.S. administration's envoy for Middle East affairs. Around 2 months ago, this proposal was put forward, most likely sometime back then. Yet both Israel and Hamas continue to reject it. But why are both sides refusing the offer? Hamas is demanding written guarantees, either from the United States or Israel, ensuring a permanent ceasefire, an end to the war, and a full Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. Israel, however, flatly rejects such conditions, while the U.S. has stated that it's not ready to offer such guarantees at this time. What's particularly interesting is that this proposal came from former U.S. President Donald Trump, not the current administration. So even though the wording of the proposal may resemble previous versions, its origin makes it entirely different. And from here, the real twist begins. Several far-right ministers within the Israeli government have also come out in opposition to the proposal. For instance, Israel's national security minister, the far-right figure Itamar Ben-Gvir, declared, "We must not retreat. Halting the fighting would be a historic mistake. If this happens, we will withdraw from the government." Meanwhile, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, currently seen as even more influential than Ben-Gvir, said, "I strongly object. This is a lifeline for Hamas, and we will not give it to them." He emphasized that Hamas is currently in a state of severe weakness due to intense military pressure, and that now is not the time for Israel to back down. Minister of Settlements Orit Stroke also weighed in, stating, "We absolutely must not agree to anything less than the release of all captives." Even the Minister of Environmental Protection. Just look at how extreme these ministers are within the government. All of them insisted the cost is simply too high and that Israel must not agree to this proposal. For example, Heritage Minister Amihai Eliyahu said, "If Hamas raises the white flag, then we can consider it. But if Hamas hasn't surrendered and is still demanding our withdrawal, that's simply not going to happen." But here's where things get interesting. I came across an article today on foreign policy, written by Daniel Shapiro, a former U.S. ambassador to Israel. This is someone who truly understands the inside story. And what does he say in the headline? He says, "What's happening inside Israel right now is extremely strange." You see, Donald Trump could potentially end all of this with just one tweet. Yes, a single tweet from him could change everything. Because let's be clear, it's Israel that's currently obstructing the negotiations. That's one point. The second, and more bizarre, point that Daniel Shapiro raised is this. Remember when Donald Trump first proposed turning Gaza into a Riviera? At the time, everyone dismissed it as pure nonsense. People said, "What do you mean? Are you going to displace 2 million Palestinians? Are you going to kill them? How are you going to relocate that many people?" Everyone thought the idea was absurd. But as time went on, we started to realize something chilling. A Riviera plan is slowly becoming a reality. And what's even more dangerous is that Donald Trump has never opposed Netanyahu in any serious way. Donald Trump had multiple opportunities to stop the war, but he didn't take them. How exactly? Well, ever since Trump entered the White House and the ceasefire collapsed, Netanyahu began escalating military action and killing Palestinians. Yet Trump never once pushed back against Netanyahu. He didn't issue any strong statements, didn't criticize him, and didn't even hint at any disagreement or tension between them. That's one issue. The second, Trump began to give the impression that there was a rift between him and Netanyahu. He used that image to justify why he didn't visit Israel before heading to the Gulf. But here's the thing. Trump could have easily stopped in Israel, even briefly, and his very presence could have put real pressure on Netanyahu to halt the fighting. And yet, he chose not to. So, Donald Trump goes to the Gulf and tells the leaders there, "I stopped the war." But in reality, it seems Trump was playing everyone. He didn't even stop in Israel, and by doing so, he gave himself the perfect excuse. The situation is out of my hands. I'm not involved in that. So when Gulf leaders asked him to help stop the war, Trump could simply say, "I'll see what I can do. I'll speak to Netanyahu." But nothing more. Had Trump actually visited Israel, he could have resolved the entire situation, or at least put significant pressure on Netanyahu. And here's what the author is really trying to say. What Netanyahu is doing right now appears to have Trump's full blessing. And the biggest proof? They're saying, to stop the war, we need to implement Trump's own plan. The forced displacement of Palestinians to Sinai and Jordan, that's one part of the story. But here's the other, even more important part. Never think for a second that Donald Trump has no control over Netanyahu. Absolutely not. Donald Trump has the full ability to stop Netanyahu, and Netanyahu knows it. But as long as he sees no pressure and no resistance from Trump, he keeps going. Why? Because this is all part of the plan, and it's moving forward exactly as intended. All these so-called efforts by Trump to stop the war or his proposals for a ceasefire, they're just empty gestures. Let's be honest, if Trump really wanted to stop the war tomorrow, he could, but he doesn't want to. He is fully content with everything that's happening. And the clearest proof? American companies are now working near the Egyptian border. When it comes to aid distribution, the situation is nothing short of catastrophic. Every day, Israel claims that the current mechanism is working. But according to the United Nations, what is actually being delivered is a mere fraction of what Gaza really needs. Naturally, Israel blames the UN, accusing it of refusing to cooperate. For instance, there are 400 aid trucks ready to move, but the UN has refused to transport their contents to the aid centers that Israel and the US have established. But the most alarming part of this scenario? Today, Israel officially announced the establishment of 22 new settlements in the West Bank. And that right there is a disaster. Why is it catastrophic? Because with the construction of these new settlements, there are 22 settlements in the West Bank, including 4 on the border with Jordan. When you speak like that, it's as if the West Bank doesn't even exist anymore, just like Gaza. And the idea that they want to turn it into a Riviera? That's Israel openly declaring that there is no Palestinian state. This means that displacement is happening in both Gaza and the West Bank. That's one thing. The other thing is that it shows you how Israel is escalating things daily and officially declaring that there will be no Palestinian state. What does that mean? It means the Zionists didn't wait to empty out Gaza and be done with it before moving on to the West Bank. They're working on both fronts at the same time. And that tells you this is a planned strategy, very clear, and they're determined to carry it out, no matter how outrageous it is. Israel is now officially announcing its intentions. When they tell you there are 22 new settlements, that's an extremely serious matter. We're talking about 22 new settlements in the West Bank, a move that goes far beyond simply expanding settlement construction. This step reflects a broader strategy aimed at reshaping influence, control, and even annexation. What's even more striking is that among these announced settlements, the Israeli government is planning to establish 4 near the Jordan Valley. This clearly signals that Israel is now firmly in control of its operational and strategic borders. How so? Well, today we're seeing articles emerging that say, by the way, As Lebanon moves to eliminate Hezbollah, it's important to understand that the Lebanese government is reportedly coordinating with Israel. This isn't speculation. This was actually reported in a recent article published by the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. The article claims that the Lebanese government is working hand in hand with Israel to dismantle Hezbollah. And that's not all. Let's talk about Ahmad Sharaa. Rather than preserving Syrian national heritage, he handed over the archive of Eli Cohen, the Israeli spy, as if it were nothing. That's right. The Syrian government itself delivered the archive of the Mossad agent Eli Cohen to Israel. This is the same Cohen who was exposed by Egyptian spy Rafat al-Hagan. After 4 years of spying for the Mossad from inside Syria, Israel today not only receives the remains of its spy, but also recovers the full archive documenting his operations, handed over directly, not through war or intelligence work, but by the same government. The remains, placed in a suitcase, were returned to Israel along with around 2,500 documents, photographs, and personal items that had belonged to Eli Cohen. These items had been kept by Syrian intelligence since the era of Hafez al-Assad and were later held under the rule of his deposed son, Bashar al-Assad. While some voices have tried to portray this as a military or intelligence operation, the reality is quite different. The Syrian government itself handed over the full archive of the Israeli spy to Israel, under the guise of a so-called goodwill gesture. This shocking move has clear implications. Israel, which was once threatened from both the Syrian and Lebanese borders, is now openly coordinating with both governments. And under this coordination, Israel is steadily expanding its influence. In fact, Israel has reportedly begun daily incursions into Lebanese territory, an ongoing development that notably has received little to no coverage in mainstream news. Following the Syrian government's handover of Eli Cohen's archive to Israel, the Israeli army has been steadily advancing and expanding its presence in Quneitra and several other Syrian cities. While the pace and scale of this expansion may not match previous operations, it's clear that the Israeli military is gaining ground, especially now that both the Syrian and Lebanese governments are either complying with or directly facilitating Israel's objectives. But what's truly strange in all of this are several unanswered questions. First, why isn't Israel interested in the presidential palace? That's one. Second, what will Gaza look like in the near future? How is it going to be reshaped or repurposed? And third, perhaps the most pressing, why hasn't Israel chosen to deport or relocate Palestinians to Lebanon or Syria? What exactly is the long-term plan here? Strange? Well, let me answer your final question. Why doesn't Israel deport Palestinians to Lebanon or Syria? Because Israel doesn't want to repeat the same mistake it made when it forced the Palestinian Authority and Yasser Arafat across the Lebanese border. That move placed Palestinians right on Israel's northern frontier, creating a scenario that ultimately led to one, even two wars between Israel and Lebanon. So yes, Israel wants to displace Palestinians, but not to Syria, not to Lebanon, and not to any country that lacks full control over its territory. Instead, Israel aims to transfer them to a state with a strong, functioning military, a country that can contain and control the situation and eventually suppress any future resistance. This entire strategy is part of a broader plan. Israel isn't just seeking to occupy territory, it's using the displacement of Palestinians to provoke diplomatic crises, which it can then use to justify the next steps in its vision of a greater Israel. Keep in mind, Israel sees Lebanon and Syria as easy targets, relatively speaking. The real goal behind displacing Palestinians is not just demographic, it's strategic. With all due respect to the sovereignty of Lebanon and Syria, the Israeli military has the capability to seize land from either country at any moment, even in the presence of agreements. But in places like Sinai, for example, it's much more difficult. And in Jordan, there's a formal peace treaty. So Israel is looking for any pretext that would allow it to justify expanding into these areas. What's happening here is that Palestinians are being used as a tool. Israel is using them as leverage. But even with that mindset, there's a crucial point to consider. In Jordan, you also need to prepare the ground for something like this. Right now, the United States is trying to convince any country to accept Palestinians who are about to be deported or forcibly displaced in one way or another. Today, extremely dangerous news has emerged. Hemeti from Sudan, has reportedly made an offer to the U.S. He told them, "I can take in displaced Palestinians." Why would he say that? Because he's seeking legitimacy. He's trying to exploit the current situation where the U.S. has just imposed sanctions on the Sudanese army a few days ago. So now, Hemeti, the same man who led the coup in Sudan, is offering to host Palestinians, possibly to improve his image or gain political leverage. This is extremely dangerous. If Hemeti gets what he wants, this proposal, first of all, would stop Palestinians at the Egyptian border. Or at least, that's Hemeti's goal. By doing so, he hopes to gain legitimacy from the U.S. government. This could potentially lead to a political shift, where the U.S. sides with Hemeti over Sudan's original military leadership. That would be nothing short of a disaster. All of this puts Egypt's borders at serious risk, from two directions, Israel on one side, and Sudan on the other. This means the Egyptian military won't just be dealing with Gaza or the displacement scenario there. That same threat could now emerge from Sudan as well. This is a major development. Now, the second point. Pay close attention here. Why doesn't Israel want its captives back? The answer to that question, according to Israeli journalist Zvi Barel, is quite revealing. He explains that Israel doesn't want its captives back because they've now become a justification to prolong the war. At this point, the Israeli captives are no longer the driving force behind the military operation. Instead, they've become a tool used by the Israeli government to legitimize continuing the war. According to journalist Zvi Barel, this aligns with Israel's recently revealed war objective, or rather, its post-war plan. So what is it? Israel plans to occupy 75% of the Gaza Strip, leaving just 25%. But how? The idea is that Israel will take full control of the entire strip and leave only a small portion, mainly the Rafah area, the Philadelphia corridor, and the Al-Mawasi zone, for Palestinians. The journalist expresses deep concern and confusion. If Israel is already occupying the rest, why leave this tiny portion? What's the purpose behind isolating Palestinians into just that area? Why is Israel leaving that 25% of Gaza? The answer is simple: to keep the war going. Think about it. Captives are used to prolong the war. Displacement of Palestinians is also part of that same objective, to ensure the war continues. Even the idea of relocating Palestinians to Hemeti or the Rapid Support Forces in Sudan plays into this same strategy. It's all about prolonging the conflict. So, the post-Gaza war plan is clear: a future war with the Egyptian military, or a broader conflict in the Sinai. Even if there are American and Israeli assurances and agreements, it's still a delayed war. That's the dangerous part. But here's the most alarming aspect. The war isn't ending. We're likely heading into a second year of conflict, and there's no resolution in sight. A war running along your borders for 2 years gives Israel the perfect opportunity to build and refine its own scenarios, especially when it comes to forcibly displacing Palestinians. That's the most dangerous part of prolonged conflict. It gives Israel the luxury of time to shape outcomes as it wishes. Here's the second major point. Pay attention to this. If Israel succeeds in eliminating the concept of a Palestinian state, there will be no normalization with Saudi Arabia. That's it. No peace deal. But now let me show you just how bold Israel's strategy is becoming. Today, CNN reported something shocking. There's a strong possibility of a new deal between the U.S. and Iran. According to the report, the US might allow Iran to enrich uranium, just at very low levels. Still, it's significant. And what's Israel's response? The head of Israeli intelligence is reportedly heading to the US, possibly to meet with Donald Trump, saying, "Go ahead and make whatever deal you want."